Not yet. He has to pick up the phone.
Good morning.
Hello.
How are you guys?
Good.
And what do we have here? All seniors?
These are juniors. This is my junior AP class. Yeah.
They've already taken their PSATs.
Yeah, they've taken PSATs.
I hope you all did well. Are you all planning to go to college?
Yes. To the hardest
And
part.
well, if you're not, you're a plumber or an electrician. That's where the money is. All right, now,
Uncle.
Miss Erin,
What
what do the students call you?
Miss Kennedy.
Okay.
And I told them that they should call you Mr. Lisberger.
No, they can call me Harry. It's
Okay.
easier.
See, I told you guys that.
Well, you can call me Uncle Harry if it makes you feel better.
Okay. They have been calling you Uncle Harry because that's what it says on their syllabus. So.
That's very good.
Could you kind of maybe start by telling the story that you told me on Saturday about your father and the Great Depression? Because that was amazing. I actually told my mom and she didn't know about it.
Sure. Yes. When I was 8 years old in 1935, which was really in the middle of the Depression, excuse me, something came up on my machine. I wanted something. In 1935, I came down with empyema pneumonia the day after my birthday, which was February 23rd, 1935. I was 8 years old. My father owned he was a pharmacist, and his father before him was a pharmacist. He owned 2 drugstores, 2 homes. If they had penicillin in those days, I would have been up and about in a few days. But with empyema pneumonia, your lungs fill up, so they had to operate on me. My father spent money to keep me in the house. He set up the master bedroom as a surgical, had it cleaned and everything done to have it as a surgery operation. And his best friend, who happened to be a surgeon, came in and operated on me. His aunt, who happened to be a nurse, came in. But the long story here is that I was in bed from February to June. They did not get you up in those days as they would normally these days. 5 days they would get you up. But I was very, very sick. My uncle said he told my father I'd be dead, but I wouldn't last out the evening. But anyway, I made it here. The big thing was the amount of money it cost my father. In those days, things were bad anyway at the drugstore. He wasn't doing that well. So it cost him somewhere between $5,000 and $7,000. There was no insurance provisions in those days. You just paid it out of your own pocket to doctors and whoever you had to do it with. So what finally happened, $5,000 is worth today $87,000. That's what the value of $5,000 in 1935 is equivalent today, $87,000. So that put him in such a hole. He could last for about 2.5 years, and finally he lost both the houses and the drugstores. And that took a lot out of him. And finally he got a job as a chemist with the Manhattan Drug Company in Brooklyn. And that was the difficult part. I saw them go on home relief, as it was called in those days. So times were very, very difficult. The average salary per year in 1935, I wrote this down just so I would remember it. I looked it up. was $1,250 a year. So you don't get very far these days. If you don't make $1,000 a week, you're not going to get very far. The only other things with the Great Depression started, unfortunately for Herbert Hoover, who got blamed for it because the stock market went to hell because there was no demand and a lot of supply. Then the National Industry Recovery Act came into being just before Franklin Roosevelt came in office. Then he called it the National Recovery Act. That also went to Congress, and then finally to the Supreme Court, and was declared unconstitutional because it tried to fix wages and prices, and all of that is unconstitutional. You can't price fix anything. So, where do you want to go from here?
Do you guys have any questions about his? Why don't we? If they have questions about your early life, maybe growing up. I know you said that you don't remember a lot about the Great Depression because you were a child, but maybe growing up and
well, let me just throw this in. On December 7th, 1941, when Pearl Harbor was bombed, it happened on a Sunday, so I had gone to church. I came back and was playing a punch ball in the middle of the street with a bunch of guys. And my mother called and said, Harry, come in. I have something to tell you. I came in. I appreciate you. I was 14 years old at the time. My mother said they just bombed Pearl Harbor and we're probably going to war. And I said, okay, Mom. And I went back out and played some more punch ball. That's how much it meant to me. Pearl Harbor, I had never heard of it before. It was many, many thousands of miles away. And it just didn't register on a 14-year-old at that time. No one knew about Pearl Harbor, unless I guess you were a major adult. My brother went into the service he's 4.5 years older than I was. In 1943, he served in the Atlantic, basically around Africa and the Mediterranean. He was on a destroyer escort, which is a ship that's slightly smaller than a destroyer. And they hunted out U-boats and checking all that out, so the shipping lanes remained open. I didn't go into the service until January 6, 1945, and I went up to Sampson, New York. It's on Lake Seneca, close to Geneva, in upstate New York. Took boot camp up there, and coming out of boot camp, I was assigned to Newport, Rhode Island for further training, and then commissioned a ship called the USS Callisto, HEP-15, which meant it was a PT tender. So I was on a PT tender which had been converted from an LST. And if you know what an LST is, and if you see some of these old D-Day movies, these ships that came up on the went up onto the beach and opened these wide, humongous doors, and they drove tanks and other armored vehicles out of them. I recarried, instead of tanks, we had a machine shop on that deck, and we can make any kind of a tool you can imagine. We also carried torpedoes, torpedo juice, which was the alcohol to make them run, and many other things. Well, so I left Baltimore where we commissioned the ship. We went to Yorktown, Virginia, and picked up rockets. And and we went through the Panama Canal. Now, there was 11 guys on board ship that was seasick from the time we left Baltimore till we got to Panama, so they were put off. You can't have chronic seasickness and be a sailor. So, fortunately, I got sick about a day and a half. You just have to get used to the roll of the ship and have your ears blend in. After that, I was fine, and we went to, as we approached Hawaii, I guess we were a few days out of Hawaii, when we dropped the bombs on Japan. And the war was over. The war in Europe had been over in May, and then the war in Japan ended in mid-August, late August. And we go on then to Anahuac in the Marshall Islands, to Guam, and the Marianas, and then to the Philippines. And while at the Philippines, instead of having to do things with the PT boats, what we did was, since the war was over, we decommissioned them. We took everything off that was of value to take back to the States. And then they burned the boats. I never understood that. I said, we should be giving these to the Filipino people so that they can use them. But we didn't want to, I guess, carry them back, and they burned them. So the beginning of the war in the Pacific after Pearl Harbor, you have to remember the Japanese took Bataan, Corregidor, the Philippine Islands. They had all of that. We had to retake all of those. And those were only the major islands. They had all of these other islands, Guadalcanal, they had Tarawa. They had so many islands that we had to go in, and thank God we had all the Marines and the Army go in and take these islands back. Most of the war, both in Europe and the Pacific, was won with air power. Thank God we had war carriers. We were able to destroy many in the Midway and Coral Sea battles. We destroyed a lot of the Japanese carriers. So that helped us a lot. Anyway, and getting back over to the Europe side, I guess I really made one of the best things that we did was in Africa, when we held El Alamein and that's located about 60 miles from Cairo. We held that from Field Marshal Rommel of the German Army. And the great part of us being able to hold that was that it was close to the Suez Canal, and it was close to all of the oil fields. So by saving that, we sort of turned the original tide of the European theater, African theater. But it really helped us. We were able to start second front in Italy by going into Anzio and then coming up through Italy into Germany. And I've been going on here. Some of you might have some questions you want to ask. Do you?
Do you guys have any questions? You guys can raise your hand and come up.
What's that?
I'm asking them if they have questions, because I want them to come up so that way you can actually see them instead of them being a faint voice. So, do you guys do you have any questions? I have questions. Not yet? Do you? No? Okay. Uncle Harry, would you be able to tell us about before you enlisted, the rationing that happened? Like, do you remember any of that, or?
Yes. Well, being on my first leave from when I came off from boot camp, they gave us a ticket for gas. I forget how many gallons you were allowed at that time. And as soon as I got home, my father said, "Oh, we can go somewhere." And we used the gas for shopping and going back and forth to visit some relatives, all very local. But we were able to do those things that they really couldn't do. And of course, food was rationed. So what was available, that's what you ate. Meat was tough to come by in those days. And I don't remember all of the things. Of course, being in the Navy, I didn't have that problem. They always fed us well. And in the Navy, you always have a clean sack, unless you're sunk, then you're in real trouble. But other than that, it's not a bad life being in the Navy.
What were you gonna say? Sorry. Hi, sorry.
That's all right.
Were you gonna say something else or about it?
Did I what?
Were you going to say something else about the rationing? I didn't know if I cut you off.
Yeah, no, that's about it. Rationing lasted for many, many years. So from 1941 to the war being over in 45, we had rationing. So everybody pulled their own weight and did whatever they had to do. It was. I can tell you about some other battles like turned us around, which was the battle of the Bulge was one of the great battles when we were surrounded in Belgium by the German army and tanks. The Germans had great tanks. They always had great tanks. We were fogged in. Not that I was there. I'm just relating to what happened. They were fogged in for years. From December of 44 to the end of January, they were fogged in a very, very bad area. And the Germans finally came to them and said, with a white flag, and said, "We'll accept your surrender. Otherwise, we'll wipe you out." And of course, we couldn't get any supplies in. The planes couldn't fly to attack the German tanks. And eventually, as they presented this to General McAuliffe, who was the commanding general in the Battle of the Bulge, his famous expression was nuts, N-U-T-S. He was not a man to use any profanity. Instead of telling him to maybe F you, we're going to stay here, he just said nuts. And it went down in history. So we stayed and won that battle. Finally it cleared, the supplies came in, and as I mentioned before, the aircrafts won this war, really did. They came in and wiped out most of the German tanks and turned them all around. And it was a major turning point in the war. What else can I tell you about?
Why don't you tell us about when you came home? Did you partake in the GI Bill at all, or?
Oh yes, I certainly did. Let me tell you. I went at age when you were allowed starting school. I started St. Edmund's parochial school at 6 and first grade. We didn't have kindergarten that. Some schools had kindergarten, not all of them had kindergarten. So I started in the first grade, and I graduated in 1941 and went into James Madison High School in Brooklyn. Graduated from there in the end of 44 or early 45 when I went into the service. I met I was sort of a beach bum during the summer, which accounts for all the dermatology problems I've had since then. I always wear sunscreen, no matter where you are, when you go to the beach. Always wear sunscreen, because it'll get you when you start your 60s, 70s. Well, I'm 87. I will be 88 in February. God has been good to me that way. But I've had a lot of dermatology done. So then when I went into service and I came out, I jumped on the GI Bill, went back to school, back to college, and I did most of mine at night because I was wooing a lovely lady that I met at the beach and married in 1949. I was 22, and I was still going to school. I went to school until 1953 at night. I also worked while going to school in the real estate business, and then I went with a bank in the real estate and mortgage division. Became a vice president, and then was transferred. One of the nicest things that happened to me, I was transferred when I was 60 years of age to down here to Tampa. Now I live in Spring Hill, Florida, which is about 35 miles north of Tampa. I think you all know where Tampa is. It's on the west coast of Florida. And from there, I worked for another 5 years, and then retired in 1993, and I've been enjoying retirement ever since. I know people who retired at age 65 and died the next year. I have been very blessed. My wife died in 1998. We had been married 49 years. And I think you find that most guys, probably who were in the service in the World War II, marriages lasted a long, long time. And I hope you guys also have great marriages. Last a long time. Anything else you need to know? Or you'd like to know?
Do you guys, Eric? Yeah.
I'll take
Eric has a question.
I'll take a question.
So he's gonna come up so you can actually see him.
And what's this gentleman's name?
His name is Eric.
Hello, Eric. How you doing?
I'm all right. A bit of cold though.
That's okay.
I'm just curious about how coming out of the Great Depression and then through World War II, during, especially the beginning of the Great Depression, there was a lot of animosity towards the federal government. I'm just kind of curious how World War II, which is obviously a period of a lot of patriotism, changed how people felt about the federal government.
Oh, well, I think you find that most people in those days loved the country so much that they would overlook the past, and things got so good so quickly after the war when everybody was working. So you went from an area where there was 20% unemployment to back to 3%, which is the norm because it's around 3% of the people who physically can't work or mentally can't work. They try to work, but there's always going to be 3% who are in some capacity unable to work. But the government really, especially when I went through it as a young person, you really don't know how badly things are going because it just seems to be normal life, period. So, Eric, I hope you go to college.
Does anybody else have a question? No? Uncle Harry, could you just tell us about the Cold War, like how the tensions between the Cold War? Like anything you remember about that, or
Well,
that influenced your life?
well, of course, people were very busy at times because of the atomic bomb. I guess changed everybody's attitude. If you had a delivery system for that bomb, you could do a lot of damage. Anyway, with Stalin, who was in command in those days, they developed, of course, the same bomb we had. Bigger and better, probably, at that time. And there was always a threat that they would deliver that bomb. So people would, what a lot of people did, we didn't, people built shelters, underground shelters, some of them in the backyard or wherever they could. But the Cold War was, especially when Khrushchev came in and was always at the UN banging his shoe on the table, threatening everybody to do everything to everybody. We were wise, we kept a very, very strong, and that's the most important thing. We have to keep a very strong military presence at all times. That's the only thing that deters other people from attacking us, is that we have the ability to retaliate. And when Gorbachev came along, things really started to mellow out. And that's when, shortly thereafter, the Berlin Wall came down, and East and West were united in Germany. That's another thing I should bring up. We are probably the only country that helps rehabilitate, build, erect buildings and help the countries that we've conquered. Or I can't say conquered really. All we did was protect ourselves from these countries. But we rebuilt Germany, we rebuilt Japan. And that was the Marshall Plan. General Marshall came up with that idea to help get these people back on their feet. So that helped. Helped keep us in good stead with all these people. Now they're all our friends. The Germans and the Japanese are our friends. But one thing, when on December 7th, 1941, one of the things I noticed, we had a Japanese restaurant about 2 blocks away from where I live. And they were Japanese Americans. They were very nice guys, but there were some real idiot people, even in those days, who went in and tore that place apart. You know, it was a horror. So it's tough when, especially, which they didn't do, that's what I want to bring up. They didn't do to people who were of German extraction. They didn't go in and tear them apart. But they did the Japanese, you know, and you can relate that to the difference in being an Asian as opposed to American, which basically were European at that time. Strong contingent of Europeans. So anyway, that's it.
Do you guys have any other questions?
Yes, well, I wish you all, Miss Erin, I just wish them all luck, and as I said, if you don't go on to college, you're going to be a plumber or an electrician. So please.
Uncle Harry, we have one other question. Were you involved at all with the Korean conflict, or
No.
No.
By that time I was, I guess, too old to go in.
Okay, so thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. I hope I helped, but
you definitely did. You
All
are.
righty.
You are amazing.
If you need anything else, give me a call.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good luck, you guys.
Thank you.
And keep studying. Keep your nose to the grindstone. Miss Erin, you give them a plus today.
I will. Most definitely. Thank you, Uncle Harry. Merry Christmas.
Okay, you too. Merry Christmas, gang.